Hello and welcome to Who Are the British and Irish All Blacks? British and Irish All Rewind. Sorry. Welcome to Who Are the British and Irish Lions? I'm Paul, the guy behind DrivingMaul, and thank you for joining me. I'm always up for a good rugby chat, so if you're watching live or watching the recording, please feel free to put comments below either on YouTube or tweet me as well at DrivingMaul. So, if you've been following the Lions tour, and if you haven't and you're watching this, I'll be very surprised. But if you listen to the British press versus the New Zealand press, you would think they were talking about two different sides when they talk about the British and Irish Lions and who they are. And a similar thing happens when we get onto the Maori All Blacks as well. So I'm going to have a chat about what these teams are. Not really the people, the names inside it, but more of how the team is put together and what that kind of means. So, if you listen to the UK media and all the podcasts, you hear a lot of people saying it's a scratch side that's been put together. They don't know each other, they haven't played together much, and they should lose all the games, or should lose a lot of the games because of that. And it's an impossible task to go out there, and whenever they win, it really is. It's a bit of an upset, and we should all cheer that and be happy for it, but we shouldn't be expecting it. If you listen to on the New Zealand side, however, you'll hear everyone talking about it. This is 4 countries into one team. They should be the best in the world. They have the biggest player base and most players to choose from. You've got 4 national teams into one team. That should make it a super national team that's playing together. So what is it? Is this a super team, or is this a scratch barbarian side that hardly know each other? Well, as you can imagine, the truth is going to be somewhere in between. Yes, these are 41, well, there's only 40 left now, of the best players from the British Isles, from 4 different teams. So, a bit like, it's probably actually a bad example I'm about to say, if you were to pick a rugby championship team from the All Blacks, the Springboks, Wallabies and Pumas, it wouldn't be any one of them, it would be a mixture of them. Yes, so they are the best players. Everyone on tour is a first choice international, pretty much. There's a couple there who are reserves, but they're all international players, international class. You can't put a side together that's a weak side on paper. Sure, there are combinations you could do, and there are some combinations that are better than others, and you have an unbalanced side, but you can't have a weak side in terms of personnel. So yes, it is that. But also, they are a scratch team. Now, not a scratch team in the same way the Barbarians are, because they come together, have about 1 training, maybe 2 training sessions, and then play a game. So they're not as unprepared as that by any stretch of the imagination. And over the 6-week tour, they will improve and become less scratch. But it is still a scratch team. It was interesting listening to one of the Green and Gold podcasts. They got an ex-player on. I've forgotten the guy's name now. I'm sorry, Ben Darwin or something like that. Maybe. And he was talking about connectivity. He said, "Look at someone like Nonu. When Nonu was at the Blues or down at the Hurricanes, he really did not the Hurricanes, sorry, down at the Highlanders before he went back to the Hurricanes. His Super Rugby form was poor. He was not an international class player playing in those Super Rugby sides. As soon as he pulled the All Blacks jersey on and had Dan Carter inside him and Smith outside him, then suddenly Conrad Smith, he looked like an international class player and possibly the best 12 in the world. Why? Because he was so used to playing with those players. The number of hours he'd had on the park with those guys was unreal. If they were to do a break, or if they were going to pass, he knew where they would be. They knew where he was going to be. Whereas playing between I can't remember who it was at the Blues, probably Gareth Anscombe and someone like Benny Raindry outside him, 2 guys he hardly knew. It was very different, especially as he arrived late and didn't have pre-season with them. And that's what this Lions side is. They don't know each other. So there are times when, on defence, they won't trust the player inside them to make the tackle, and they'll get drawn in. On attack, you'll see them over and under running the ball all the time and not have the right lines because they're not used to how each other plays. Now that's mitigated by picking some combinations, but it's not totally mitigated. So that it is, I say, they are not whilst they are a team from 4 countries, they're not the sum of their parts in the same way that other teams are. So what about the New Zealand Maori then? The Maori All Blacks, as they're now called, get the right name. Again, they're a scratch side. They've been together for a week to play together. And yet here's a side that went on it's like a 10 or 12 game unbeaten streak against international teams a few years back. Now they had lost one since then, but there was a couple since then. But that's the kind of run they did. If you look at the lines, they're picked from something close to 20 different clubs. If you take the Aviva Premiership and the Pro 12 and knock off the Italian teams, that's 20 teams. If you look at the New Zealand Maori, they're picked from 5 teams, 5 Super Rugby teams, essentially. And a lot of these players will have played together either as the New Zealand Maori before, or also as in the under-20s or other age grades of New Zealand Rugby in the Baby Blacks or so forth. So, yes, again, they are a scratch team, but they're a scratch team from a lot less teams. So, for example, if we look at the spine of 8, 9, 10, 12, they're all from the Chiefs. And so your whole decision-making, actually 8, 9, 10, 12, 15, your whole spine of that team, the decision-making piece, is all Chiefs. They train each other day in, day out. They know each other like the back of their hands. So it's not as much of a problem. There are more combinations in there. Also, the New Zealand sides don't all play exactly the same way. At the extremes, you've got the Highlanders and the Crusaders, with the other teams somewhere in between. But there is definitely a New Zealand way of doing things that filters down from the All Blacks. Depending on who you talk to, depends on how controlling and how prescriptive you think that is. But essentially, they all play a certain style or have certain basic skills that they play off. If you compare some of the British teams, that's not the same way in any stretch of the imagination. A Wasps and the Saracens are very different styles of rugby, and that's just within the Aviva Premiership. And but if you go and start comparing, say, a Glasgow to a Saracens or another team, that's also very different as well. So yes, the Maori All Blacks are a scratch team, but not in the same way that the Lions or the Barbarians ever are. One of the other points, so from the Northern Hemisphere, this one has been seen as a scratch team that they've got a pretty good chance against until we saw the selection. It all sort of turned around in the last week or so. But before that, some of the talk was, oh, they'll possibly beat the New Zealand Provincial Barbarians, and oh, the Maori look like it's the second easiest game. Not true. That squad is stacked with talent. Whereas if you listen to the New Zealand press, this was the 4th test, not the Crusaders game, which got titled that a week or so ago. This was the 4th unofficial test. So again, it's interesting how the British side, British press, have read what the team is compared to what the New Zealand press and New Zealand public think of who the team are. They're very different, again, just like they are for the Lions. So just some thoughts around that. Again, with the Maori All Blacks, it is somewhere in between, but it's closer to the 4th test side or the New Zealand B side, whereas the Lions, it's probably, yes, they are 4 countries in the scratch side, but it's probably slightly towards the scratch side and moving the other way as the tour goes on. Thank you for watching this. Let me know your thoughts. Give it the old thumbs up or share if you've enjoyed this. Thumbs up on Twitter, the shares on YouTube, thumbs up on YouTube, the shares on Twitter. I'm all over the place today. And don't forget to sign up for my newsletter. Link above on Twitter, link down below on YouTube. I'm off to Tonga versus Wales and New Zealand versus Samoa tonight. So do catch me there. If you're going to be there, do tweet me. And also, after the Maori All Blacks versus the Lions game, I will be doing a live reaction with rugby numbers from Wellington and the pen from Glasgow. So I'll have British and New Zealand pair with me. I'm going to be at GATS, the beer festival in Auckland, doing it live from the beer festival. So if you're going to be there again, hit me up. Cheers, guys. Catch you all later, and enjoy your rugby.